President Obama once told outgoing Russian President Dmitry Medvedev that he'd have more flexibility after the elections. Well, Obama won, and now President Vladimir Putin has Crimea. I'm PJTV's Scott Ott, joined now by Stephen Green and Bill Whittle. And men, our president warned Putin to stay out of Crimea or face the consequences. So, Putin sends troops, Crimea votes to secede from Ukraine, Putin declares Crimea part of Russia. And then Obama brings down the boom. Monday, he freezes the assets of 11, count them, 11 Putin cronies and bars them from international travel. If that fails to get Putin to pull his troops out of Crimea, to respect the Ukrainian constitution and international law, Obama says he's got more oligarchs and apparatchiks on his naughty list. Well, Bill Whittle, after Obama announced his draconian sanctions, lawmakers in the Russian Duma passed a resolution demanding that Obama do the same to them. Is the U.S. fast becoming a global laughingstock? Or does our president know something that we don't know about the power of such sanctions?
Any sentence that begins with, does President Obama know something that we don't know, is false on its face. I'm sure he envisions himself as, the Count of Monte Cristo with his deep understanding of human nature. He's the Count of Monty Python is who he actually is. When you impose sanctions as your strongest measure, and then the entire nation that you're imposing the sanctions on 11 people on says, hey, why just impose it on those 11? Why not impose it on all of us? It is. I don't know how you don't take the Russian side in this argument. Just from a sheer theatrical point of view, just from a sheer. Really, that's it? They bring it. Seriously, do it. It's like that old joke. First prize is a week in Cleveland, and second prize is 2 weeks in Cleveland. It's just like, seriously. But this is serious, so let's get serious. Here's America in 2014. Economically, it's 1928, and politically, it's 1936. And we all know what a swell time that was for the ensuing years in both economic reality and political reality. Anybody who understands history, looks at our present situation economically, can't stop thinking of 1928. And anybody who knows anything about history, especially recent geopolitical history, has to look back to the mid-30s when a power-hungry, murdering dictator took the measure of the West, found nothing but weakness in things like, oh, well, we'll cooperate and we'll give you the missile defense shield that protects Poland as long as you don't mess up my personal political ambitions in the upcoming election. Took his measure there, took his measure at Syria as if there was another temperature reading needed to be given, absolutely took his measure there, and now is using the exact same measure to gain territory and world dominion that Adolf Hitler used. Putin is using a plebiscite that was done illegally to justify an invasion. That's exactly what happened with the Anschluss in Austria, and it's exactly what's happening now. And the position that we took in Austria was, well, it's their backyard, really none of our business. Let's send them a sternly worded letter, which encouraged him further. And the next thing you know, it was Czechoslovakia, and the next thing you know, it was Poland, and then it's war. So it'll be something else, and then it'll be Poland, and then it'll be war again. And I saw something, and I wish I could remember his name, and sincere apologies to whoever you are who wrote this. But I was just killing some time, and I saw a tweet, and somebody said, we don't live in the post-Cold War period. We live in the interwar period. And I heard that tweet, and I just said, oh, man, oh, man, oh, man. For people who understand how these things work, that had a ring to it that sent a chill down my spine.
Well, Stephen Green, in 1954, the Soviet Union designated Crimea as part of Ukraine without any input from the local residents who considered themselves Russian. This weekend, 60 years later, the local people actually did vote to return to be part of Russia, or at least to be independent of Ukraine, without any shots fired, despite the presence of thousands of Russian troops who were, just in town to protect the locals. It sounds like, at least for that area of the world, a relatively democratic process, doesn't it? And in any case, how can the nation that invaded Iraq wag its finger at Russia about Crimea?
Yeah, look, I want to speak for a moment for the real tragedy of Ukraine. Its borders make no sense. They haven't since the early Soviet period. And Ukraine should have it all. They've got about the same size and population as France. They've got some of the best soil in the world. They've got energy resources that are just astronomical. They've got great navigable rivers. They've got a wonderful warm water port. I mean, they've got it all, and yet they've got one of the smallest per capita GDPs in all of Europe, about $3,000 a year per person, even though the country is filled with all sorts of brilliant engineers and technicians. So that's how badly this country has been managed all these years, that they can't even put up a fight when they're almost as in bad a shape next door neighbor bullies them around and steals the Crimea from them. So that speaks to the real tragedy of the Ukraine. It's getting worse. It's not getting better. Our problem is, if I can paraphrase Donald Rumsfeld, you go to war with the president you have. And so when you ask Bill this question about a laughingstock, look, we had three things we could have done. We could have sat this one out, which was probably our least bad option given the president we have. We could have partaken in the partition of Ukraine to give it some borders that make sense in a way that brings the Western alliance closer together to stand against further aggression, or we could have had what we've gotten, which is whining and moaning and petulantly displaying our impotence in the face of Vladimir Putin. That's the president we have.
You know, Steve brings up a good point, Bill. I mean, why people have been giving President Obama a hard time about what he's saying or doing, but why is the United States saying or doing anything about this Crimean peninsula? I mean, other than sort of containing Russia, which sounds all Cold War relic-y these days, what is the U.S. national interest at stake here?
The U.S. national interest is international rule of law, period. Full stop, end of sentence, that's it, that's all. We are part of an international community of the rule of law. The invasion of Iraq was a response to an act of war on the part of Iraq, and for a 12 or 15-year period of violations of the ceasefire that voided the ceasefire and was an ongoing act of war that was perpetuated by his invasion of Kuwait. If the Russian people, if the people of the Crimea want to join the Russian Federation, then the way to do that is without Russian troops in country. The way to do that is without Russian troops inside the Ukraine. They withdraw their troops, they let things simmer down for a year, you hold a plebiscite according to national law, and you redraw the borders the way you did with Yugoslavia or the Czech Republic. That's how it's done legally. And if we countenance invasion and then allow a plebiscite after the fact to justify the invasion, then you will find, as we have found throughout history, that you can always come up with enough votes of people saying, oh, we're really glad the Germans are here. We think the Nazi overlords are just swell. It's all about the rule of law. It's all about lawlessness. And if we didn't have a lawless president who disregarded all of the laws of the United States, or at least the ones that were inconvenient to him, he would understand that this is what's at stake, and he shouldn't have any problem, frankly, rallying every decent country on the face of the earth to say to the Russians, if you actually believe that the Ukraine should be part of Russia, withdraw your troops behind that line, get out of the invasion business, hold a legal plebiscite, and then we'll do it the way we want to and we'll party with you ourselves. But if we're not willing to stand up and do this now, then they will assume correctly that we won't be willing to stand up and do it the next time. And the next time it won't be this clear-cut, won't be like going into Austria with the Germans. It'll be more like going into the Sudetenland. They'll have a little bit of support, but they'll have a lot of people who'll be displaced. And then after that, it'll be a full-on invasion like in Poland. And they'll do it because they'll be convinced, as Hitler was, that we are a bunch of weaklings and a bunch of absolute self-centered narcissists who don't have the stomach for a fight, and instead of it being stopped by a marching band on a bridge on the Rhine, if a single French policeman had stood on the crossings of the Rhine when Hitler went into the Rhineland, there never would have been a World War II, and there never would have been an Adolf Hitler. But no, we're much smarter than that. So this is exactly what's going to happen again, Scott, and that's why the rule of law has to be maintained at all costs, period.
Well, Steve, in September of 2013, Vladimir Putin created a new state-run news agency after scrapping the old one and appointed his buddy Dmitry Kiselyov to run it. This week, Kiselyov noted on air that Russia is the only country that can reduce the United States to a radioactive ash heap, a fact that his graphics department then illustrated. Should we be concerned that Putin's own sort of local version of Chris Matthews speaks so comfortably about Russia's nuclear strike and survival capabilities Or is Koselyev just off the reservation a jabbering loose cannon?
Well, in Soviet Russia, cannon loose as you. No, that stuff about nuclear annihilation, that's for domestic consumption. That's for boosting Putin's popularity at home, because people are a little nervous about all this stuff, and they very well should be. But the thing we have to remember is that Russia is a loser country. They have a shrinking population. Their only exports are energy, which we could make them lose those exports by developing our own resources and having Western Europe develop their resources more as well. So Russia is a real loser country. The only way Putin holds on to power is to expand. Right now, his appetites include the Crimea. Tomorrow, they might extend to the Dnieper River. They could later extend to the Bug River in Poland, and then maybe the Oder-Neisse line, or the Rhine, or the south of France. But the only way for a state like Russia, in its condition, to continue to exist is to gobble up neighbors. And that's the lesson that we keep forgetting again and again and again.
Oh, what is the American foreign policy doctrine with regard to Russia? What does President Obama believe the U.S. role in the region should be? You know, there are only three types of people who don't know the answers to those questions. Number one, our enemies. Number two, our friends. And number three, our president. For Bill Whittle, Stephen Green, and the entire trifecta crew at pjtv.com, I'm Scott Ott.